Tonight, the lost cause of Oslo Accords, and what do they mean for Palestinians? And Canadians facing an uphill battle while adopting children from Muslim countries. We cover stories about another migrant tragedy in the Canary Islands, criticism over Quebec's cultural safety bill, an outcry over Belgium's bill to make sex education compulsory. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Aishah Ashraf. Today, it has been 30 years since the Oslo Peace Initiative was signed by Palestinian and Israeli authorities. The initiative had ignited hope of settlement for the Palestinians and peace in the region. But since then, it has been stagnant. On September 13, 1993, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Palestinian Liberation Organization leader Yasser Arafat met at the White House to sign the deal. The first Oslo Accord, termed Oslo I, marked the initial recognition between the Israeli and Palestinian leaders, with both committing to end their prolonged conflict. Oslo II, signed 2 years later in 1995, elaborated on the process of promoting peace within different organizations. The aim was to ensure Palestinian self-determination, with a state coexisting alongside Israel. To realize this, steps such as the Israeli military's withdrawal from the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967 were proposed. As a result, the Palestinian Authority was formed, administering restricted governance in designated West Bank areas. However, the final treaty never materialized. Many right-wing Israelis who viewed the Palestinian Liberation Organization as a terrorist group rejected any concessions to the Palestinians. This strong opposition even led to the assassination of Rabin in 1995. On the Palestinian side, organizations like Hamas and Islamic Jihad believed the two-state solution would negate Palestinian refugees' rights to return to their lost lands. The peace deal further got derailed as Israel continued its occupation, avoiding military withdrawal from the West Bank. Many Palestinians say that the Oslo Accords were exploited by Israel to amplify its illegal West Bank settlements. Presently, Israel's government, influenced by ultra-nationalist ideologies, continues to endorse further settlement expansions. Experts say 30 years later, with the disputed West Bank, a besieged Gaza Strip, and an unyielding stance on occupied East Jerusalem, the Oslo Accord looks like a lost cause. Muslim Canadians are facing difficulty in adopting children from countries of their origin. The difficulty stems from Canadian law that views adoptive parents as legal parents. On the contrary, Islamic legislation views adoptive parents as legal guardians or godparents. The legislation is based on a Quranic interpretation that encourages fostering children in need without severing the ties to the child's biological family. As a signatory of Hague Convention on Inter-Country Adoption, Canada does not recognize parent-child guardianships established in countries under Islamic law. Canada does not legalize adoptions from Jordan, Somalia, Pakistan, and Morocco, as these countries follow Islamic legislation. 5 years ago, the government committed to reviewing the policy. The policy has still not changed, even if reviewed, and leaves many Canadian families stranded for adopting children from these countries. For the past 4 years, former Calgary resident Maha Al-Zubi and her husband Tahsin Kharayasat have been trying to have their adopted son Furat come to Canada from Jordan. The couple are Canadian citizens. They adopted 3-month-old Furat from Jordan, unaware of the potential complications with Canadian law. They were shocked when Furat's visitor visa to Canada was denied shortly after his adoption. Another Canadian citizen, Farhan Abdi Omer, was also denied permission to join his 2 adopted sons. Omer, a former police officer, adopted 2 boys from Somalia 15 years ago. The 2 boys have yet to join him in Canada. An investigation by CBC has also brought to light a memo to the former foreign minister suggesting a link between the national security and the adoption ban. Critics say Canada's policy is based on a misinterpretation of Islamic adoption law that is discriminatory against Muslim families. Zubi's lawyers call the rejection of their application extremely unfair. Hundreds of people have died and thousands are missing after flooding in the eastern city of Derna in Libya. The floods are caused by Storm Daniel, which swept across the coast Sunday night. Dams outside Derna have collapsed, triggering flash floods in Wadi Derna, a river that flows through the city. The floods have destroyed at least 20% of the city, including homes, businesses, and infrastructure. Many people have been swept away by the waters. Rescue workers are still searching for survivors, but the death toll is expected to rise. The government has appealed for international assistance to help relief efforts. The founder of a Tripoli-based think tank says the presence of two rival governments in Libya has complicated authorities' efforts to deal with the crisis. The medical center of Al Baida, the fourth largest city in Libya, was flooded and patients had to be evacuated. Other affected towns included Susa, Marj, and Shahat. In the meantime, the international community has come together to help the people of Derna. Humanitarian organizations are providing food, water, shelter, and medical care to those affected by the floods. At least 12 migrants have drowned while trying to reach the Canary Islands, a Spanish archipelago off the coast of northwestern Africa. The group of 50 people was on a dinghy that began to deflate. One passenger called for help on a satellite phone, and a Spanish migration NGO contacted the Spanish Coast Guard. The rescue teams arrived 9 hours later. By that time, 12 or 13 people had already drowned. The remaining 38 people were rescued and transferred to the island of Fuerteventura. The tragic rescue comes amid a dramatic spike in migrant arrivals to Canary Islands. This weekend, 1,282 people have been rescued while making the journey. By the end of last month, nearly 22,000 migrants had arrived in Spain by sea. The figure surpasses the total number of migrants from the previous year. The majority of migrants who are arriving in Spain by sea are from Morocco, Senegal, and Algeria. The Spanish government has taken steps to address increasing migrant arrivals at the Canary Islands. In July, the government had deployed additional Coast Guard vessels and aircraft to the region. The government has also increased the number of detention centers for migrants. For more on Canadian MPs' call to tackle Chinese interference in the US and Canada, stay tuned. The Quebec government's recent bill on Indigenous healthcare has drawn criticism from the province's College of Physicians and Indigenous groups. A committee formed by the college and the Indigenous groups argues the government's cultural safety bill is, quote, paternalistic and colonialist. The bill is aimed at improving the treatment of Indigenous peoples in the health network. The government is pushing the bill without acknowledging that systemic racism exists in the healthcare system. The college and other Indigenous groups are calling on the government to make significant changes to the bill. They are calling on the government to expand the bill to include other marginalized groups. They are recommending that Indigenous groups be adequately consulted throughout the legislative process. The college also believes that the bill should further describe how to implement a cultural safety approach in healthcare facilities. The government defends the bill, saying it is a step in the right direction and will help improve the quality of healthcare for Indigenous people. Debate on the bill is likely to continue as the legislative process continues. Assembly of First Nations Quebec Labrador Chief Ghislain Pickard has abstained from the committee's deliberations and condemns the bill for not consulting Indigenous groups. Canadian lawmaker Michael Chong is urging members of a U.S. congressional committee for more cooperation between Ottawa and Washington against Chinese interference. Chong is calling foreign interference a serious national security threat to Canada. He says it threatens the Canadian economy, the country's long-term prosperity, parliament, and elections. Chong says he's a child of immigrants from the Netherlands and Hong Kong. He has explained how he was, quote, the target of a disinformation campaign on a Chinese language social media platform due to his criticisms of Beijing. Chong says his experience is a case of Beijing's interference in Canada. He says many other cases go unreported, and the victims suffer in silence. The conservative lawmaker was appointed as Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister in 2020. Earlier this year, Canada expelled Chinese diplomat Zhao Wei, who was accused of being involved in a plot to intimidate Chong and his relatives in Hong Kong. China sanctioned Chong in 2021 after he led a motion in Canada's parliament condemning Beijing's treatments of its Uyghur Muslim minority as a genocide, a charge the Chinese government has firmly rejected. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has presented a motion in the House of Commons asking MPs to demand the government take more drastic actions against all foreign interference threats, including expelling Chinese diplomats. The Wallonia-Brussels Federation, Parliament, and Belgium unanimously endorsed a measure last week that mandates sex education in schools. The Federation serves the French-speaking residents of Brussels and Wallonia. The move has led to public demonstrations. The legislation, which impacts around 85,000 students in Wallonia and 25,000 in Brussels, garnered unanimous approval. Only 3 deputies had opted to abstain. In response to the decision, hundreds of citizens, predominantly from the Muslim community, gathered for a demonstration outside the Parliament building. The previous day, several Muslim organizations in Belgium voiced their concerns about the initiative. The groups have issued a collective statement. In a statement, these organizations say that the measure challenges the values of home-based education as well as the well-being of students and their families. 7 prominent groups, including the Islamic Federation of Belgium, the Federation of Albanian Mosques in Belgium, and others, have endorsed the statement. Although sex education has been present in Belgium's curriculum since 2012, it has not been obligatory. The current resolution mandates every primary student from grade 4 to 6 receive this education. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Sound Vision, which is a not-for-profit organization. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad.